Before I go any further, if you're listening to this, take a second and like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. I want to know how far this story reaches. Now let me tell you what happened. At my age, you don't expect surprises anymore. You expect routine, coffee that tastes the same every morning, floors that creak in the same spots, silence that doesn't ask questions. I'd already buried my wife. I'd already retired. I thought life was done throwing punches. I was wrong. My name is Harold Whitman. Most folks just call me Hal. I lived outside a small Texas town where people wave even if they don't remember your name, and where storms don't ask permission. I worked construction most of my life. 35 years of calloused hands, early mornings, and doing things the hard way because that's how I was taught. That house was mine. Built plank by plank. Nail by nail. And so was my marriage. My wife's name was Evelyn Whitman. Evie. She passed 3 years before the storm. Cancer. Slow, patient. The kind that gives you time to prepare and still leaves you unprepared. Evie was the organized one. Bills, paperwork, bank accounts, insurance. She handled all of it. I handled roofs, engines, fences, anything that required muscle instead of patience. At the time, I thought that was trust. I didn't realize it was also ignorance. After she died, I kept things exactly the way she left them. Her chair stayed at the kitchen table. Her coat still hung in the hallway. Her filing cabinet stayed locked, not because I was hiding anything, but because I didn't know what I was looking at. As long as the house stood, I believed I was still standing too. My son Daniel Whitman lives about 2 hours away, in Dallas. He's 52 now, smart, polished, talks fast, always sounds like he's already thought 3 steps ahead. He works in consulting, though I've never been entirely sure what that means. Daniel learned early how to talk his way through things. Evie used to say he had a salesman's mouth and a preacher's smile. I didn't argue with her. He wasn't a bad son, not on the surface. He called on holidays, checked in when it counted, but after Evie passed, he started asking more questions. About paperwork, about accounts, about what Evie handled. I didn't think much of it. I should have. Daniel was never alone in anything important. There was always Rick Collins. Rick and Daniel have been inseparable since high school. Same town, same shortcuts, same habit of showing up when something valuable was involved. Rick had a way of making trouble sound practical and greed sound like opportunity. I never liked Rick. Looking back now, he was always there when something valuable was about to change hands. Rick always helped Daniel. Always backed him up. Always whispered when Daniel hesitated. But I trusted my son. And sometimes that's all it takes to lose everything. The only person who ever really challenged Daniel was Evie. She saw through people, didn't raise her voice, just asked the right questions and waited. After she was gone, there wasn't much resistance left. Except Margaret Maggie Lawson. Maggie lived 3 houses down from mine. Widow, late 60s, former school secretary who never forgot a name, a date, or a lie. She checked on me without asking and told me the truth whether I wanted it or not. She'd say, "Hal, that boy talks fast, faster than his father ever did." I'd just shrug, change the subject. Men my age don't like being warned about their own children. The day the storm came started like any other. Hot, thick air, the kind that presses down on your shoulders. The weather radio had been chirping since morning, but in Texas it always is. I'd lived through storms before, tornado warnings, hail that cracked windshields, floods that came and went. I checked the sky around noon, dark to the west, that sick green-gray color that doesn't sit right in your gut. Evie used to hate storms. She'd say, if the sky looks sick, something's wrong. I almost laughed remembering that. Almost. By evening the wind picked up, trees bending low, the kind of wind that doesn't howl, it pushes, like it's got weight behind it. I made a sandwich, sat at the kitchen table where Evie and I used to eat dinner every night at 6 sharp. Her chair sat empty across from me. I left it that way on purpose. The lights flickered once, then twice, then went out. The thunder didn't boom. It cracked, like the sky tearing itself open. Rain followed immediately. Not drops, sheets. The kind that hits sideways and finds every weakness you didn't know you had. I grabbed a flashlight, checked windows. The radio screamed warnings now. Severe thunderstorm, possible tornado. Then the roof groaned. That sound stays with you. Wood complaining under pressure, nails crying out, a deep, ugly creak that tells you something about to give up. The wind slammed the side of the house so hard it knocked me off balance. I hit the wall, shoulder first, and for a second I couldn't breathe. I thought about Evie, about how she hated storms, about how she wasn't there to hold my hand. Glass shattered next, windows gave way, rain poured in like the house had decided to drown from the inside. When the roof tore loose, it didn't sound dramatic. It sounded final. I don't know how long it lasted. Fear stretches time. When the noise finally faded, there was nothing left but rain tapping on exposed beams and the sound of my breathing. I stood slowly. The house was broken. Half the roof gone, walls soaked, furniture ruined, the workshop out back flattened, 30 years of tools and memories buried under splintered wood. I walked outside barefoot in the rain, not caring anymore. The place I'd built with my own hands looked like it had been chewed up and spit out. Standing in the wreckage, I assumed I'd lost everything. I didn't know that something had already been taken. Maggie showed up before the siren stopped. Wrapped in a raincoat, eyes sharp as ever. "Oh, Hal," she whispered. She grabbed my arm. "You're alive, that's what matters." I nodded, but I wasn't sure yet. Daylight made it worse. Storm damage always does. Insurance adjusters walked around shaking their heads. One of them, a young guy with a clipboard, asked about documentation, ownership, coverage, assets. I told him Evie handled most of that. He paused. "Sir," he said carefully, "there should be more here, especially if your wife had additional accounts." "Additional accounts?" I asked. He hesitated. "Sometimes people keep things separate," he said. "Savings, investments." That word, investments, felt foreign in my mouth. Evie never talked about money like that. Or maybe she did, and I wasn't listening. I stood there in the wreckage, rain-soaked papers sticking to my boots, and felt something crawl up my spine. Not grief. Not fear. Suspicion. Because for the first time since Evie died, I realized something that made my stomach turn. There might be parts of my wife's life I never knew, and parts of my son's involvement I never questioned. And as the wind rattled what little was left standing, I understood something that would haunt me for months to come. The storm wasn't the worst thing that was coming. Grief does strange things to time. Days blur together, weeks disappear. You wake up tired without knowing why. After the storm, every hour felt like that, stretched thin and heavy like the air before rain. There's a kind of loneliness that comes after disaster that's worse than the disaster itself. When the noise is gone, that's when the questions start talking. I stayed in what was left of the house. Insurance said I could. Maggie didn't like it, but I told her I wasn't ready to leave yet. Old men don't move fast when everything they've known gets ripped apart overnight. I slept in a chair with a blanket, ate whatever didn't need cooking, spent my days walking through rooms that no longer felt like mine. And that's when I realized something else had been damaged. Not by wind, Not by rain. By silence. The file cabinet. Evie's cabinet. It had been knocked over during the storm. Drawers pulled halfway out. Papers soaked, stuck together, ink bleeding into itself like it was trying to disappear. I stood there a long time before touching anything. Because once you start looking through someone's life, you can't pretend you didn't. Evie had always been careful. Labels, tabs, notes written in the margins. She believed order kept chaos away. But as I went through the files, something felt thinner. Bank statements missing. Account summaries without balances. Folders marked long-term that held nothing but empty plastic sleeves. At first, I told myself the storm must have taken them. Then I remembered something that made my stomach tighten. Daniel had been here 2 months earlier. Just for a weekend, said he wanted to check on me. We sat right there at the kitchen table, this same table, and he'd asked questions. Casual ones. Do you know where Mom kept her paperwork? Did she ever talk about investments? Are you sure everything's in your name? At the time, I thought that was concern. Now it felt like inventory. I drove into town the next morning. The bank was the same one Evie and I had used since the 80s. Same building, same smell of carpet cleaner and old paper. A young woman at the desk smiled too brightly when I told her my name. She disappeared into the back. When she came out, she brought someone older with her. That's when my stomach tightened. We sat in a small office with glass walls. They spoke softly, carefully, like I might crack. She explained that some of Evie's accounts had already been consolidated, transferred, handled. By whom? I asked. She looked at the screen. Your son, she said, Daniel Whitman. The room tilted. I gripped the arms of the chair, waiting for her to say she'd made a mistake. There must be an error, I said. She shook her head. There are signatures, she replied. Authorizations, everything appears to be in order. Appears, I repeated. She nodded. That word mattered. The number didn't come right away. They eased into it, as if softening the blow might help. $3 million. I stopped breathing for a moment. Not because I wanted it. Because I couldn't understand it. Evie clipped coupons. Evie reused aluminum foil. Evie argued over pennies at the grocery store. $3 million didn't fit the life I remembered. It felt like finding out your marriage had a locked room you never entered. I walked out of the bank numb. Sat in my truck with the engine off, hands shaking on the steering wheel. I didn't call Daniel right away. I needed to know if this was real. So I went to the county records office, then another bank, then an investment firm whose name I barely recognized. Each place filled in another piece. Slowly, reluctantly, like they were waiting to see when I'd break. Evie had been careful, but Daniel had been quicker. That evening, Maggie came by with a casserole I didn't touch. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said one thing. Hal, your son didn't stumble into this. I shook my head. He wouldn't, I said. He wouldn't do that to his own father. She looked at me, the way teachers look at students who want a different answer. He didn't do it to his father, she said. He did it to his opportunity. I finally called Daniel that night. He answered like he'd been waiting. Dad, he said, I figured you'd find out eventually. That word again. Eventually. You took her money, I said. No, he replied, I secured it. For who? I asked. For the family, he said, for your future. My future, I asked. I wasn't asked. You didn't need to be, he said. Mom trusted me. That cut deeper than anger. I asked where the money was. He deflected. I asked why Rick was listed as a consultant. He laughed. Rick. Always Rick. Rick just helped with logistics, Daniel said. Don't overthink it. That's when I felt the first real chill. Logistics is a word you use when something's already planned. I told Daniel I wanted to meet. In person. He hesitated, then agreed. Dad, he said before hanging up, you need to be careful how you frame this. Why, I asked. Because misunderstandings can get ugly, he replied. The line went dead. That night I sat in the dark, listening to the wind slide through broken boards. I thought about Evie, about trust, about how quickly people decide what's best for you when they think you're done deciding for yourself. The storm had taken my house. But whatever this was deliberate. There's a moment when fear stops protecting you and starts humiliating you. I didn't know that until it happened. I used to think fear was what kept you careful, what kept you alive. But when you get old, fear becomes something other people use like leverage. They don't yell, they don't rush, they just wait for you to fold. That's what Daniel was doing. I felt it in my bones before I could prove it. We met 3 days after my call to the bank. Daniel picked the place, a quiet diner off the highway, vinyl booths, bad coffee, the kind of place where nobody listens too closely and nobody remembers faces. Rick was already there when I arrived. That alone told me everything. He sat beside Daniel like he belonged there, coffee already half finished, papers stacked neatly on the table, not legal papers but organized ones, notes, printouts, preparation. Daniel stood when he saw me. Dad, he said, leaning in for a hug. I didn't move. He froze for half a second, then sat back down. Rick smiled. Hal, he said, rough couple weeks, huh? That smile didn't reach his eyes. We didn't talk about the weather. Daniel went straight into it. You're upset, he said. That's understandable, but you need to calm down. That word again. Calm. Like emotion was the problem, not theft. I want the money returned, I said. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. Rick chuckled softly. That's not realistic, he said. Daniel shot him a look, then turned back to me. Dad, this isn't a cash withdrawal. These are structured assets. Then unstructure them, I replied. That's when Daniel sighed. The same sigh he used when he was a teenager and thought I was being unreasonable. Let's be honest, Daniel said. You don't need that kind of money. There it was. Not we'll fix this. Not we made a mistake. Just justification. That money was your mother, he continued, and now it's part of a larger plan. What plan? I asked. Rick leaned forward. A plan that keeps things efficient. Efficient. That word landed hard. I told them I'd spoken to a lawyer. Daniel stiffened. Rick stopped smiling. Which lawyer? Rick asked. I don't see how that's your business, I replied. Rick leaned back. Careful, he said. That's how misunderstandings turn into investigations you don't control. I looked at my son. You going to let him talk to me like that? I asked. Daniel didn't answer right away. That silence did more damage than any words could have. That was the moment I realized this meeting wasn't about money anymore. Finally, Daniel spoke. Dad, you need to understand something, he said. This path you're on, it doesn't end well. Sounds like a threat, I said. He shook his head slowly. No, it's a warning. That was worse. He started listing things. My age. My medical records. The storm damage. The fact that my house was unlivable. You're vulnerable right now, he said. That's not an insult, it's a fact. Capacity. I felt my jaw tight, before I realized my teeth were grinding. I realized then that this conversation had never been about explanation. It was about pressure. You push this, Daniel continued, and people start asking questions about capacity, about judgment. Rick nodded, like this was all very reasonable. I stood up slowly. My knees protested, but I stayed upright. You stole from me, I said, from your own father. Rick shrugged. Money doesn't belong to people, he said. It belongs where it's managed best. That's when something inside me cracked. Not loudly. Quietly. Like wood under too much weight. Daniel stood too. Lowered his voice. You walk away from this, he said, and things stay calm. You keep pushing, and I can't guarantee that. Guarantee what? I asked. He leaned closer. That you'll like how this ends. There it was. Clear enough. No shouting. No witnesses. Just certainty. I left without finishing my coffee. Didn't look back. In the parking lot, my hands shook so badly I had to sit in my truck for 10 minutes before I could turn the key. Not because I was weak. Because I finally understood the situation. They weren't afraid of me. They were counting on me being afraid of them. That night I didn't sleep. Every sound felt like a knock. Every headlight outside made my heart jump. I kept thinking about how easy it would be for them to win. Paperwork doctors, judges who'd never met me. I thought about how old men disappear quietly every day. Not by dying. By being decided for. The next morning, Maggie came over. She took one look at me and didn't sugarcoat it. They threatened you, she said. I nodded. That's not family business anymore, she continued. That's a crime. I don't want to destroy my son, I said. She leaned forward. Hal, she said, he already decided to destroy you. That landed hard. She told me something I hadn't considered. Forgery across state lines. Financial fraud. Identity misuse. Federal, she said. Not local, not civil, federal. I laughed weakly. I'm just an old carpenter, I said, who's going to listen to me. She slid a piece of paper across the table. A phone number. The FBI listens, she said, especially when someone thinks age makes a man invisible. That night I sat alone in the dark. The house smelled like wet wood and old memories. I thought about Evie. About how careful she'd been, how she hated bullies, quiet ones most of all. And I realized something painful and clear. Daniel wasn't scared of the truth. He was scared I'd use it. I picked up the phone. Stared at the number. My hand trembled, not from fear of them, but from knowing this was the last decision I'd ever make as just a father. I took a breath. And I dialed. The FBI doesn't sound the way you expect. There's no drama in their voices, no speeches, no urgency meant to impress. The man who answered the phone sounded tired, calm, like he'd already heard worse that morning. I told him my name. Then I told him what had happened. He didn't interrupt, didn't rush me, just listened. When I finished, he said, "Sir, I'm going to ask you a few questions." That's when I knew this had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. They came 2 days later. 2 agents, plain clothes, no sirens, no show. They walked through what was left of my house slowly, like they were reading a story written in debris, asked about dates, names, phone calls, documents that never made it back into the cabinet. When I mentioned Rick Collins, they exchanged a look. That look told me everything. Rick wasn't new to them. Things moved quietly after that. No confrontations, no announcements. Just requests, subpoenas, phone calls I wasn't copied on. I was told not to contact Daniel or Rick. That hurt more than I expected. Not because I wanted to talk to them, but because silence feels different when it isn't yours to choose. One afternoon, the female agent called. "We froze the accounts," she said. "Nothing moves without your approval now." I thanked her. After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table, temporary one, borrowed, and stared at my hands. For the first time in months, nothing felt like it was slipping. The first account came back a week later. Not all of it, not at once, but enough. The bank manager slid the papers across the desk and pointed to the signature line. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. I signed my own name. That moment didn't feel like victory. It felt like balance returning. Rick broke first. That didn't surprise anyone. Men who live in shortcuts panic when there's nowhere left to turn. He talked about forged signatures, digital transfers, how Daniel wanted everything done clean enough. Clean enough. That phrase stayed with me. Daniel was arrested quietly. No spectacle, no headlines. Pulled aside at work. Walked out past people who didn't know him the way I did. The agents asked if I wanted to be there. I said no. I didn't need to watch him fall. I just needed him to stop standing on me. The rest unfolded the way these things usually do. Plea agreements, courtrooms, consequences that sound lighter than they feel. Some of the money came back. Some went to legal fees. Some stayed frozen. I didn't fight for every dollar. I fought for control. And I won that. Daniel tried to reach out. Letters, messages through lawyers. Apologies that sounded careful. Regret that sounded measured. I read one letter all the way through. Just one. Then I folded it and put it away. Some things don't need a response to be answered. I built smaller after that. A simpler place, one level, fewer memories stacked on top of each other. I kept Evie's chair. I kept her cabinet. Unlocked it this time. Inside were notes, careful ones, instruction, contingencies. She hadn't known everything, but she'd known enough. She trusted me to stand up when it mattered. That trust stays with me. Daniel and I don't speak now. I won't pretend that doesn't hurt. A man can survive storms, betrayal, courtrooms. But losing your child while he's still alive, that's a quiet grief. One you carry without explaining. Still, this is what I know for certain. I make my own decisions. I sign my own name. No one plans my future without asking. And that matters. So I'll leave you with this. I lost my house to a storm. I lost my son to greed. But I kept my name, and that was enough. If this story touched you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. And don't forget to comment, tell us where you're watching from. Thank you. Have a great day.